My parents gave my sister a music studio and left me a broken guitar, mocking, "Play your heart out, loser." But when I got signed by a major label, they claimed they always believed in me. It all started in a small town just outside Nashville. A place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the local diner felt like the center of the universe. Our house was nothing special, one story, cracked driveway, and faded shutters, but my parents always kept it clean and tidy. At least, on the outside. I was the middle child, Lydia. There was my older sister, Claire, and my little brother, Luke. Claire was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. From the time she was a little girl, she had this natural musical gift. She could play the piano by ear, and her voice had this raw power that made people stop and listen. All my parents talked about was her talent, her potential, her future as a musician. It was like she was the sun, and I was just a shadow. Then there was me. I wasn't as outgoing as Claire, nor was I as attention-grabbing. I wasn't the one who took the stage at family gatherings or school events. Instead, I hid behind a guitar I'd saved up for, strumming quietly in my room when no one was listening. It wasn't that I didn't love music, I did. But I was always too shy to show it. And every time I tried, it felt like no one cared. My parents never really paid attention to my interest in music, not like they did Claire's. They'd buy her new piano sheet music, a keyboard, and the best music lessons money could buy. But when it came to me, it was as though I was invisible. I tried to tell them about my passion, but they'd just nod and change the subject. They didn't get it. Then came Claire's 18th birthday. The day everything changed. It was an ordinary evening, the kind of night where the sky seemed to stretch on forever, and the air had that crispness of late summer. My parents called us into the living room, and Claire beamed as she opened her present. It wasn't just any present, it was a fully stocked music studio. A music studio. The walls were lined with expensive sound equipment, a grand piano that looked like it belonged in a concert hall, and high-end recording gear. My parents watched as Claire's face lit up, her joy palpable. They were thrilled for her. They had no idea how much that gift would crush me. I stood there, holding my breath, trying to mask the hurt. "Lydia, do you want to see your gift?" My dad asked, his voice warm, but not with the same enthusiasm he had for Claire. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wouldn't be anything remotely close to Claire's extravagant gift. I followed my parents into the next room, and there it was, my gift. A guitar. Not a nice one. No, it was cheap. The kind you find in a yard sale for $20. The strings were old and the wood was chipped. The guitar wasn't even tuned properly. I looked at my parents. My mom smiled at me, trying to make it sound like they'd done something great. "Here, honey. We thought you'd like this. You can play and practice your music. You'll love it, right?" I stood there in shock. There was a note attached to the guitar, and it read, "Play your heart out, loser." It felt like a slap in the face. My heart sank, and I didn't know what to do. I had spent years dreaming of something bigger, of music, of recognition, of being seen as something more than just Claire's shadow. But this? This was a joke. Claire had her studio, and I had a broken guitar. I tried to force a smile, but I couldn't. The night was awkward. Claire was too busy talking about her new studio to notice how I felt. My parents, oblivious to the hurt they'd caused, congratulated her endlessly, as if this gift was the key to her future stardom. They didn't even acknowledge how I was feeling, how crushed I was. That night, I went to my room and stared at the guitar. I didn't want to play it, but I did. I played every chord, every note, though the sound was off-key. I tried to pour my anger and sadness into the music, but it only made me feel more alone. 4 months after that night, Claire's studio became the epicenter of attention in our house. She spent hours there, recording music, practicing, and preparing for her big break. My parents constantly talked about how talented she was, how she was destined for greatness. But no one ever mentioned my music. They didn't care that I spent hours practicing with my broken guitar, trying to teach myself everything I could. I started to withdraw further. Claire's success felt like a reminder of my own failure, of how much I would always be overshadowed. But I didn't give up on music. I kept practicing. I wrote songs. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. I just wanted to be heard, even if I had to do it on my own. One day, a friend of mine told me about an online music competition. It was a local thing, but the winner would get a chance to sign with a major label. I didn't think much of it at first. Why would anyone want to sign someone like me? But my friend encouraged me to submit, and after some hesitation, I did. I figured, what's the harm in trying? A few weeks later, I received an email. I had been chosen as one of the finalists. I couldn't believe it. Out of all the people who had entered, they had chosen me. I was scared to tell my parents. I knew they wouldn't understand. I could already hear their dismissive tone. But the email made me hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance. So, I told them. I gathered the courage to sit down with them, and I explained. I've been chosen for a music competition, I said, my hands shaking. I could get signed by a label. There was a long silence. My dad looked at me, a small smirk playing on his lips. That's nice, sweetie, he said, almost condescendingly. But Claire's got her studio now. You know, she's got real potential. I'm sure she's going places. You're doing something fun, right? Claire didn't even look up from her phone. Good luck with that, she said, her voice flat. There was no encouragement, no interest. Just indifference. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it hurt. I left the room without saying anything else. The next day, I went to the competition. I gave everything I had. I played my heart out, singing a song I had written about feeling invisible. The judges were impressed. They saw something in me. And when they offered me the contract, I felt like I had finally found my place. When I called my parents to tell them the news, the conversation felt surreal. Lydia, that's amazing. My dad said, his voice suddenly bright. We always knew you had it in you. I almost dropped the phone. I had heard that same line so many times directed at Claire, but now it was mine. You've done it, honey. We're so proud of you. My mom chimed in. I paused, holding back the flood of emotions. The anger, the bitterness, the years of being ignored. Thanks, I said, my voice cold. I appreciate it. I couldn't shake the strange feeling that settled in my chest after that phone call. I'd just signed with a major label, something I'd dreamed of for years, and yet the praise from my parents felt hollow. It was as if they were giving me approval only because it was convenient now, because they could claim they were part of my success. I didn't call them for a while after that conversation. I threw myself into my work, into my music. It was easier to focus on my career than to confront the bitterness that had been bubbling up. The album I was recording became my therapy, every track a piece of me, every lyric a reflection of the journey I had been through. But even as my career grew, and I gained more and more recognition, the distance between my family and me only seemed to widen. I could feel the tension when I went back home for holidays or family gatherings. They'd act like nothing had happened, as if they hadn't spent years dismissing me. They'd tell people they always knew I was capable, that they were so proud of me, but I saw through it. The truth was clear to me, they had never truly believed in me. Not until the success was there for them to latch onto. And that hurt. Claire, too, seemed to have changed. She was still working on her music, but there was a sense of insecurity behind her usual bravado. It wasn't something she said outright, but I could tell. The studio she'd gotten had become less of a sanctuary for her and more of a reminder of what she hadn't achieved yet. One evening, I received a call from her. It was the first time in months that she'd reached out to me directly. I had been preparing for a performance and hadn't seen her name flash on my phone screen. But I picked up anyway. Lydia, she said, her voice hesitant, I don't know if this is the right time to say this, but I'm proud of you. I wasn't sure how to respond at first. Thanks, Claire. That means a lot, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I mean it, she continued. I didn't think you'd make it, you know? But I see it now. You're doing something incredible. Her words took me off guard. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me. Was she trying to make amends for the years of dismissal? Was she genuinely offering me support, or was it just the guilt of knowing that I had surpassed her? I didn't do it for you, Claire, I said quietly. The truth hung in the air. I did it for me. She didn't respond right away. I could hear the sound of her shuffling papers on the other end of the line, and then a sigh. Yeah, I guess I get that, she finally said, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. But I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you. You deserved better than I gave you. It felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders, hearing her admit it. We'd never been close like that, not truly. But maybe, just maybe, things could start to change. Not immediately, and not without time, but it was a start. I don't want you to feel sorry for me, Claire, I said, my voice steady but gentle. I'm doing fine. It's hard when people only acknowledge you once you've made it, you know? I know, she whispered. I'm sorry, Lydia. We didn't talk much after that. The conversation lingered in my mind for a long time, but in a way, it felt like a step forward. Not everything was fixed, not by a long shot. But it was progress. My album was released to rave reviews. It wasn't a chart topper, but it got enough attention to solidify my place in the industry. I toured, met fans, and started to feel like I was living the life I had dreamed of. But despite all the excitement, I was still haunted by my parents' behavior. Their sudden praise felt more like an afterthought than something sincere. The more I achieved, the more they seemed to pretend they had always believed in me. A month after the album dropped, my parents invited me to a family dinner. I was hesitant, but I agreed. I wasn't sure what kind of conversation would happen, but I figured it would be easier to face them than keep avoiding it. When I arrived at their house, my dad greeted me with a grin that seemed too wide, too forced. Lydia. You're here. We're so proud of you, he said, slapping me on the back in a way that felt too rehearsed. I smiled tightly, not trusting myself to speak. My mom joined in, repeating the same lines they'd told me over the phone. We've always known you had it in you, she said. It's just so nice to see everything coming together for you. We're so proud, sweetheart. My stomach churned. It was the same lines they had used before, the same praise they'd thrown at me when they realized how far I had come. But I could see the pride in their eyes now, the pride that was only there because of my success. Luke, my little brother, was the only one who seemed to act normally. He didn't care about the music industry or how much attention I was getting. He just wanted to know if I could come to his soccer game next weekend. It was a refreshing change from the adult world of expectations and superficiality. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk, with my parents constantly showering me with praise. But I couldn't escape the bitterness I felt. As the evening wore on, I began to feel more like an outsider in my own family. I excused myself early, something I hadn't done in a long time. Before I left, my mom pulled me aside. Lydia, we just want you to know that we're so happy for you. We always believed in you, even when we didn't show it. I didn't know how to respond. There was so much I wanted to say, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and gave her a quick hug. When I walked out of their house that night, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and defeat. On one hand, I had achieved everything I'd set out to do: music, recognition, success. But on the other hand, the people who were supposed to love and support me hadn't been there when I needed them most. They had seen my success, and now they wanted a piece of it. It wasn't genuine support. It was opportunism. They hadn't believed in me when it mattered, but now they were acting like they had always known I'd make it. And that hurt. But even so, I couldn't help but feel a bit of peace. I had finally learned to believe in myself, even if no one else did. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had done it on my own. Maybe that was the true victory. I had learned to live without my parents' approval. I had stopped seeking validation from them years ago, when I realized it would never come unless I was successful enough for them to see the potential they had always ignored. But as much as I'd convinced myself that their lack of support didn't matter, it still hurt. It still stung whenever I thought about how they had treated me over the years, how Claire had been the golden child, the one who was always praised and never questioned, while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. But something inside me had shifted after that family dinner. I wasn't the same person who had begged for their approval as a teenager. I was different now. I had my music, my fans, my label. I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. And most importantly, I no longer needed their praise to feel validated. Still, I wanted them to know the truth. I wanted them to understand what they had done and, more importantly, I wanted them to see what they had missed out on by ignoring me all those years. It wasn't about getting revenge in the traditional sense, there would be no cruel retaliation or fiery speeches. It was more about making them realize how much they had hurt me, how they had dismissed me for so long, and how my success had nothing to do with their beliefs in me. It was my own hard work, my own drive, and my own refusal to give up. And so, I made a plan. A subtle one. A way to prove that my success wasn't their doing, that I had built it all on my own, without their support. It started with the next big family gathering. Thanksgiving. The one time a year when everyone got together, my parents, Claire, Luke, and me. We all gathered around the dinner table, the smell of roasted turkey filling the house, and the usual small talk that came with such occasions. My parents, as usual, gushed over Claire, who was talking about her music career, making it sound like she was one step away from a breakthrough. I could see my mom's eyes gleaming with pride, and my dad's constant reassurances that Claire would be the next big thing. But I wasn't here to play the quiet, invisible sister anymore. I wasn't going to shrink into the background and let them treat me like I was just the afterthought. I decided to bring up my upcoming tour. I had just booked a set of dates for my album, and I was excited to hit the road and meet my fans. It wasn't a massive, world-changing tour, but it was mine, and it felt good to be able to say it out loud. So, I've got my first official tour coming up, I said, casually, as I passed the mashed potatoes to Claire. My mom paused mid-sentence. Her eyes widened in surprise, her fork suspended in the air. Wait, what? A tour? Are you serious? Yeah, I nodded, my voice steady. I'm leaving in a few weeks for a national tour. It's been in the works for a while now. There was a moment of silence at the table. My dad's brow furrowed, and Claire stopped talking. She had been going on and on about her studio, but now her voice trailed off. That's amazing, Lydia, my mom finally said, her voice uncertain. But, is this really the right time? Your album didn't even hit #1, did it? I could tell what she was trying to say, but I wasn't about to let her dismiss me again. Well, Mom, I replied with a slight smirk, it didn't need to hit #1 to sell out my first few shows. I'm doing just fine without the chart-topping hits. People like my music, and I'm not just performing for the label anymore. I'm doing this for me. I could see her struggling to process this new reality. My dad looked at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Well, that's great, sweetheart, he finally said, but his voice lacked the enthusiasm I had expected. We're proud of you. Really? It didn't feel sincere. It never did anymore. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Later that evening, after dinner had finished, I made my way out to the porch to get some air. I needed a break from the forced smiles and awkward silences. Claire followed me outside, her footsteps hesitant. You really think you're going to make it out there? She asked, her voice quieter than usual. I mean, you didn't get the support you needed. People like Mom and Dad are always going to see me as the one who got it right. I'm not sure they even know how to take you seriously. I looked over at her, feeling a mix of pity and something more complex. I don't need them to take me seriously anymore, Claire. I never have. I've been doing this on my own since the beginning, and that's what I'll continue doing. I've earned everything I have, without their help. She was quiet for a long moment. I could see her grappling with what I'd just said, but there was something more in her eyes than just the typical skepticism. There was a flicker of something else, maybe respect, maybe regret. I'm sorry, Lydia, she said quietly. I should have been there for you. I was always so caught up in my own stuff that I never really noticed how much you were doing on your own. I was surprised. I hadn't expected an apology, let alone one that sounded sincere. But I didn't want to dwell on it. It was a small step, and I wasn't going to let it change my path. Thanks, I said, offering her a small smile. It's never too late to start supporting each other, though. The conversation ended there, but it lingered in the air. Maybe Claire was finally starting to understand that I wasn't going to wait around for anyone's approval anymore. The months that followed only solidified my independence. I went on tour, performing at venues that ranged from small clubs to sold-out arenas. Everywhere I went, I was met with love and admiration from fans who had found something in my music that resonated with them. It was surreal, and at times overwhelming, but I was doing it. I was living the dream I had always envisioned. And my parents? They started to send texts every now and then, checking in. They asked about my shows, my album, and how things were going. They wanted to know if I was safe, if I was taking care of myself. It was a shift, a small one, but it was there. I didn't respond with bitterness anymore. I answered their questions, but I kept the conversations brief. I wasn't interested in making them feel like they could just waltz into my life now that things were going well. My success wasn't for them. It never had been. One night, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was softer than usual, and she sounded almost humble. I just wanted to say, Lydia, I've been thinking about how we treated you, she began. And I know we didn't give you the support you deserved. I'm sorry. I see now that you did it all on your own. We didn't believe in you, and that was wrong. It wasn't the apology I had expected, but it was enough. It wasn't about them suddenly becoming perfect parents. It was about acknowledging what had happened, acknowledging that I had earned everything I had without their help. I appreciate that, Mom, I said, my voice calm. But you don't need to apologize. I'm good. I've got everything I need now. And that was the final piece of closure I needed. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't feel the need to exact some grand revenge or make them suffer for their years of neglect. My success was the revenge. It wasn't about rubbing it in their faces or making them feel small, it was about standing on my own, achieving everything they said I couldn't. It was about showing them that I didn't need them to define me.